Thanks. I think it's great to see that level of support. I'm going to invite our next panelists to make their way up to the stage as we transition to our nuclear waste management discussion. And so as those folks make their way up to the stage, I was thinking about the fact that we've kind of saved the best for last in our agenda here as we talk about the big question that always comes up with nuclear. And the point was made yesterday during our Innovator Showcase that, we look at nuclear, we often talk about nuclear waste as a barrier to deployment, when in fact it is contained, it is highly controlled and highly accounted for. And so really, when we think about our waste profile compared to other energy sector players, we really are doing it the best way possible. And figuring out better ways to shift that narrative and take credit for the hard work that goes into managing very successfully, as we do in this industry, the back end of the fuel cycle, I think, is an ongoing conversation, an important thing to moving us forward. And Kara Colton is going to moderate this next session to explore that issue more fully. So I'll hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I like to call this session Baby Got BackEnd. And I'm very excited to be on the stage with these four very well-respected and personally friendly people that are great to talk to about this subject. And we've got good, diverse representation. We have Brian Wood from Orano. All these bios can be found online, by the way. I don't want to waste time with that, but we have Brian from Orano, a company that has dealt with the front end and the back end for a very long time. We have Stefan, who is the head of the radioactive waste disposal program for the IAEA. And so he's going to help us as we often look to international examples to see, what can we use here? What can we try? Katrina McMurrian, she's the executive director of the Nuclear Waste Strategy Coalition. It's an organization that has, I'll let you explain, but it does have a very diverse group of members. We at ECA have been very fortunate to work with them. And then Everett Redmond, who is a next generation of nuclear development that can use waste as the fuel for a reactor that doesn't need to be refueled for 10 years. So we have a good sense of all the different players that are here. I think that in the US, we've done a great job of working on this issue, and we really honed in on what not to do. So I think we've tried everything and not done well so far. So let's have a conversation about the back end of the fuel cycle, which we haven't successfully addressed, and yet this entire conference has been the excitement about the next generation, which will, surprise, produce more waste. So with that, I'm going to start off with you, Everett, and I'm going to ask you a more general question, which is, what types of waste could be produced by advanced reactors, and how is that different than the waste that we're dealing with now?
Okay, thank you. So we have a number of different advanced reactors out there. Oklo's reactor is a liquid sodium fast reactor. So the fuel there is metallic fuel, sodium bonded fuel. So very similar in look to PWR and BWR fuel. So you've got rods, you've got a can on the outside, so it looks very similar. It is solid. The difference is the sodium inside, and that is something that may have to be dealt with. We've certainly heard Department of Energy talk about it. Paul Murray talk about sodium may need to be removed before it goes into a repository. But that's something that can be done. INL is doing that right now for the EBR2 fuel. So it looks very similar in the sense of solid form can be dealt with the same engineering that the current fuel is dealt with for disposal in a deep geologic repository. Then when you look at other reactors, you've got TRISO fuel, again solid fuel that can go into a repository, and then molten salt reactors. Those get a little bit more interesting in the sense that the liquid fuel, but at the end of the day it will be a solid as well. I think all of this is an engineering challenge, and then of course there's the political challenge in the US of actually getting a program moving forward. But the disposal of the nuclear waste is just an engineering challenge. There may be some opportunities like what we're doing going to do to recycle fuel, both from the LWR fleet, PWRs and BWRs, as well as our own fuel. That will have a benefit of reducing some of the waste, change it into a different form, but reducing volume going into a repository. You still need a deep geologic repository, so I'll answer that question up front.
Thank you. I could ask it one more time
You
later.
do need that, but I think all of this can be managed, and we know how to do it. We'll figure, we'll come up with the engineering solutions as we go forward. The politics, that's the bigger issue.
Okay, let's dig into the politics a little bit, Katrina. You've been working on this for a while with, again, lots of different folks that have been engaged with the Nuclear Waste Strategy Coalition. When you look at where we've been, where we hope to go, what is your organization's priorities to move forward?
Thank you, and I'll do a little bit about what you said about explaining what my organization is. And first of all, of course, I want to thank you all for inviting us to be here, and thank all of you for sticking around and listening to the back end of the back end, right? So I appreciate that. I guess, I should say the NWSC, or Nuclear Waste Strategy Coalition, is an ad hoc organization of several state utility commissions. We heard from one of those earlier today, and we'll kind of come back to some of that. Some other state officials, such as attorneys general, some consumer advocates, emergency management, radiation control, transportation officials in states. Some electric utilities, both that include operating nuclear reactors and shutdown reactors, or some with both. And then some other experts, individual members who have expertise in the area from different things. And we all work together on trying to get the fuel removed from the commercial nuclear plant sites that exist today. We've been at this since '93. Our organization shouldn't still exist. The government should have helped us out with this issue long before now. But we're still at it and coordinate really closely with ECA and several other organizations, including NARUC, which you heard about earlier, and NEI, the Nuclear Energy Institute, the Decommissioning Plant Coalition, the American Nuclear Society, several others that are all trying to work toward getting policy solutions on this and trying to answer that political piece. To Kara's great question, which I'm finally getting to, we would really like to see the government deliver on an integrated nuclear waste management solution. And you heard from Stephanie earlier, there's a lot of great work being done about collaborative base siting, and we're supportive of that. We want to see that come to a great conclusion. Hopefully that maybe some of your communities are interested in stepping up in some way, whether it's with respect to an interim solution or a permanent solution. And we really try to emphasize, and have emphasized it at DOE as well, that this integrated solution really needs to include more advancement toward a repository. I know you all are familiar with some of the politics around Yucca Mountain. We have been focusing of late more on trying to work toward a second repository idea and really using the collaborative base siting approach to get there. So hopefully some of you may be interested in stepping forward in that way. We'd certainly like to see that. We'd also like to see the government address some of the governance issues. Every 4 to 8 years, everything changes within DOE, and we have to kind of start all over and figure out what we should do next and how to pick up the pieces and move forward. We would like something more stable, and that could start with trying to set up an office within DOE that's really focused on this issue. And then we also want to make sure that we get access to the funds that electric customers paid in over a number of years. It's got a $50 billion balance with interest at this time. So the money is there to move forward on interim storage, a repository, and transportation in the way that it needs to be done. The solutions are out there. I agree with Everett that a lot of this is just an engineering challenge. It can be solved. The political stuff is harder, and certainly we've not done as good of a job as we should, but we invite you all to work along with us however that can be, whether being members of our group or ECA, or working with us on trying to push the government for a good solution on this, and it's out there. Sorry for the long-winded.
Thank you. In fact, when we think about solutions, we've seen some success abroad. Obviously, Canada had an exciting announcement this year that they'd chosen a site. Finland, we're going to emplace next year, as early as next year, right? Into their deep geologic repository, their first one in the world. What else can we look at from abroad, Stefan, that you think might be able to help us here as we, yet again, get to this challenge.
Yeah, well, thanks, Caro, and also, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. Thanks to ECA. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is an amazing forum. Just want to tell everybody my perception. I learned so much, and I witnessed so much new information, and the energy that I see in this room from both the industrial developers and the communities and state representatives are working towards securing a robust energy future through the use of nuclear is really, I think, an excellent example, something great to follow. And yes, thanks also for including this panel, this topic. It's useful to address the full life cycle responsibly, and providing for the endpoint for waste management is one of the responsible steps to do. It can be done. The international experience that you asked about, you already pointed to the Canadian National Geologic Disposal Program, which has been very successful in progressing. You point to Finland, who is today a world leader of types, if you will, as they're currently cold commissioning all their operations for spent fuel disposal in their existing geologic disposal facilities. Now, when they will actually start operation also depends on the obvious interaction with their National Safety Commission, STUK, who are reviewing all the operational process before they issue that operational license. That may happen next year. It may happen a year after, who knows? There might be some details to check on. I think on a century scale project, that's not so important. And maybe that's one key lesson we learned from the other experience as well. The program in France, which is currently in licensing review, the program in Switzerland, which submitted a license application, and the program in Sweden, which broke ground January this year to construct their DGR. An excessive focus on the schedule, well, we got to get this done in 5 years, otherwise we're not doing our job. That is misguided. It's important to have a sound process in place, one that's accepted, a decision process that works with communities, with counties, states, the national needs, addresses issues like transport questions and so on. And then if it takes 2 or 3 years or 10 years longer or not, doesn't matter. We're looking at century-scale projects for disposal, just as we're looking at century-scale projects for having those new reactors and giving us that energy we need. So I just want to get that out. These programs that have progressed have done so by not overemphasizing we need to get it done next year or else we fail. It's not a failure. It takes the time it takes. As somebody said, it moves at the speed of trust, right? Maintain that confidence. Do what is necessary. The science and the technology is well established. Internationally, there's no doubt it is well established in the United States. You may be aware the United States was the first national program to submit a full license application for DGR, which got a review from the NRC, technically and scientifically a positive review. So I mean, after I saw Stephanie's presentation just a few minutes ago, I say, well, I have nothing left to say. Everything, the current state of the art combined with all the scientific and technical expertise on how to set up a process seems to be there. So I think I have a very positive view on the future of this year. But yes, it is an issue which everybody hears about, spent fuel disposal or high-level waste disposal, whatever your waste is. Let's talk about that at another moment. People who've never heard of it, they say, I don't want to hear about this. I know it's bad, so don't even continue the conversation. And so that's why I think this approach, well, let's hear expressions of interest, to just have a conversation, see if it fits in the local file. That makes sense to me. If it works, we'll see. We have to find methods that work in the social fabric. So, right.
Thank you. And, just to get even more specific from where you started, Brian, Orano's obviously been doing this for quite some time, quite successfully. When you look at this situation that we find ourselves in, what do you see? What can Orano bring to the table that we can chew on and hopefully move us forward?
So yeah, thanks. Thank you for having me. I forgot to say that yesterday. I saw the clock ticking and the time crunch, and my heart started palpitating, and I'm like, oh no. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate being here and supporting the forum. So Orano is on its, I believe, 6th generation of reprocessing of fuel in France. So we have done it, and we have done it successfully, and we are actually moving forward and it's getting better each time. So we're on our 6th generation. France just signed a bill that actually says that they will reprocess fuel until 2100. So, so of course, when you have that long stability of reprocessing fuel and a national directive of this is the path forward that we're going, then it creates industry, and it creates innovation, and it creates those kind of things that you can then go after and start to build. So with Orano, with that declaration by the French government, we went ahead and we are now building, expanding George Best. So now George GB2 will, I think it's going to be GB3 now, where they're actually building a new reprocessing site in France with another essentially revision of the technology. The other thing that I think is really interesting that Orano does, so I've only been with Orano, I will admit, just 1 year, so I'm relatively new. But one of the things that I was absolutely shocked at that I've never seen before, went to France for my first visit, went to Le Hague, did all the tours. They have a visitor center there that they take people from high school students all the way through elected officials. A lot of people probably in this room have gone. And the outreach that they do to show people that the reprocessing of the fuel, it's safe. And it is safe, and we can do it. And that's something I hadn't experienced before, working on the utility side and things like that. But the education that they do in France to let people come in, go behind the curtain, look at the hot cells, see what's going on, it's pretty interesting.
Thank you. So, it's interesting, especially from Stefan, what you were saying. This is a new nuclear conversation. We're super excited about the new nuclear conversation. And we're kind of separately having conversations on the back end of the fuel cycle as one of DOE's collaborative siting consortia, sorry. The change from consent to collaboration is a good improvement. I just am having a hard time getting there. But what we really found through our work as a consortia is it's all an economic development conversation, which is quite interesting. So, people have asked me, do you really think a community is going to raise their hand? Do you really think a community is going to respond to one of these expressions of interest? And I am an eternal optimist. I'm also a Pollyanna. But I really do believe that we are going to have communities raise their hands based on the conversations that we've been having. And the reason they're coming to the table is because of the opportunity that new nuclear is bringing to them. And so with that, I kind of want to ask Everett, how is Oklo working in Ohio? How is Oklo working with communities and states to do the development that you want, but to educate and bring the right people to the table for alignment to ensure that your project goes as smoothly as possible?
Sure, thank you very much. So our first reactor, as I said yesterday, is here in Idaho, and we're doing engagement with different organizations here to do outreach, beginning to ramp that up quite a bit, actually. The Ohio, we have done a couple of, before I jump there, let me say the following. We have not stated where our second reactor is going to be built. It'll be based on interactions with our customers. So we have not specified that. We do have MOUs in place with Southern Ohio Diversification Initiative for potential deployment in Southern Ohio. But there we have participated in a couple of events, community events. We had an event when we signed the MOU to invite the community in and talk with us, very well received. There's been some other events and another one coming up this summer that we'll participate in. So we do that community engagement where appropriate. I shouldn't say where appropriate. We do that community engagement. In terms of recycling and commercial fuel fabrication, we're in the process right now of identifying a site for that. So we've been out talking to different states. There's not much more I can say about that at the moment. We will eventually, later this year, make an announcement about that. And then, obviously, from that point, begin doing a lot of engagement, continuing to do engagement, building that relationship. It is a relationship between the facility, be it a reactor, be it a fuel fabrication facility, be it a recycling facility. It is a relationship with the community, the county, and the state. So it's important to note that, and that's a relationship that needs to be maintained long-term. And then you need to continue to maintain a relationship with the federal delegation, which we do. And so it's just constant work. But it's good, it's enjoyable. I mean, that's how you do. You build a relationship and everybody works together.
Absolutely, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think sometimes, everybody here excluded, obviously, advanced nuclear developers don't want to talk about waste. You ask the question and they kind of, yeah, we got that, that's technically, we can do that, and then we move on. Everybody wants to move on because it isn't a technical problem, like you said, and so why should the nuclear engineer be able to figure out the social aspects of the problem, which are the predominant aspects of the problem?
I mean, sure. I mean, you've got folks are interested in jobs. They're interested in what the project can bring to the community, what the benefit is of it. Being electricity, in our case, we're teaming up with customers. So you've got customers that are going to be deploying. We'll be deploying next to them. So you get a combination of power plus jobs plus what the main customer is. But the waste issue, when it comes up, you just have to address it openly and honestly.
Absolutely.
Talk to them about what's going to happen. Where's it going to be? In our case, we're looking at some storage on site. Ultimately, when we have our recycling facility up and running, we'll be shipping there. Transportation, something you need to talk about as well. It is doable. It's done all the time in the United States and worldwide. But you just need to be upfront about it.
Absolutely. I think we try to relay to people that just like the private sector feels like they may be taking a risk, a community may be feeling like they're taking a risk, but if you know the risk and you feel informed about that risk, then you're the same as anybody else, and it's a decision to accept that risk because it's a potential win with a risk you can accept. So I appreciate you saying all of those things. A little bit of a broader question now, and this is for anybody. If we look at cleanup, which is where ECA originally started. You have legal agreements that have been put into place around cleanup, and yet technology developed after those agreements were signed. So now we're in a situation where we're looking at waste. How do we build flexibility into these decision-making processes so that we're not locked into the Nuclear Waste Policy Act? How do we create an ability to not, as Stefan said, say, if it doesn't happen in 3 years, this is a failed effort? And I will throw that out to anyone on the panel.
Well, that's an interesting question. So there's a couple things I think about there. One is, yes, new technology comes along, so you don't want to be, you want to be able to evolve. But at the same time, you do need to move forward with things. So you don't want to get in a situation of, oh, I'll wait for new technology. Oh, I need to do R&D or continue to do R&D. I'll give Paul Murray over at DOE a lot of credit. He's not focused on R&D right now. He's focused on moving forward. We have the engineering. We can do it. Let's do it. But you're right. The agreements need to be, especially when you're talking about cleanup, and agreements between the states and Department of Energy need to have some flexibility in that. Though I would say also, and coming back to a point I made earlier, a lot of it ends up having to do with relationships. So if you're making progress on the cleanup, if you're doing that work in good faith and you're making some headway, then you can make adjustments as things go along. Adjust with new technology, develop, modify, improve. You got to work it. In the political system, it is a little harder because you do get locked in to agreements and you're making changes to them, but there are reasons to adjust.
Absolutely. Stefan, did you want to add?
Sure, it would be my pleasure. So both, you asked a bit from the policy, let's say the social fabric perspective, that's maybe a little difficult to answer. The changing laws, changing policies can be a process even more difficult than getting everybody to agree to site a new nuclear reactor, for example. It needs to be done if that's your blocking point. I mean, there's just no way around it. Or you can revisit that conversation. Maybe today you have a different type of conversation than you had 20 years ago. I don't know this. If a national program were to establish a new framework. I think it would be extremely wise to have these types of flexibilities and not be too rigid and too directive early on, because if you are, that takes away the liberty of the constituents who would like to have a word to say, we'd prefer it like this or like that, or more over here or more over there, right? If it's written in law, you can't change that anymore, and so you take away that freedom that I think ECA is also discussing a lot on how to engage with everyone to come to that consensus where people say, hey, this is a win-win situation. We can all live with this. Everybody benefits. And the flexibility is not only in policy, it's also in what you do with the substance. I think both Everett and Brian work on technologies which say, well, this is not waste. So Everett, if I understood, and I heard your presentation earlier, your organization is actually reusing used fuel from the EBR2. So that's something that might have been considered waste before, but actually you see it as a resource for your reactors.
That's 100%. And I would note, actually interesting on the EBR2 fuel, it's being processed by Idaho for the purposes of making it available for disposal, removing the sodium. A byproduct of that is HALEU, which we've got access to. So yes, we are doing that, and we're going to be using the same technology they're using for our recycling facility. So there's a lot of opportunity.
And obviously, Brian, with the very classic reprocessing you referred to, used fuel in France considers used fuel as a resource. We're not throwing away energy, right? It's a policy and it's kind of a value analysis decision if you are willing to invest into processing, reprocessing, if you see that overall for the overall nuclear endeavor, this is beneficial, you'll do it. If you say it's economically not viable, or if there are other policy constraints, I think we heard these in an earlier panel, then you may decide to not do it right now. But it's not a fixed definition, this is waste, right? In the end, Everett said it, we will have waste. We will have high-level waste. Technically, we know how to manage it from a process. There doesn't have to be a rush. I think it doesn't mean don't do nothing, don't you worry, eventually, no. Working on it is fine, but move it at the speed of trust until you find that solution. From the IEA, I feel I will not have done my job until we will have been able to convey this ability, this international expertise that yes, you can. Solutions exist. It is not this difficult thing that that past history seems to have portrayed it to be. So just strictly from a technical, scientific, safety view, it's not that hard a challenge. And so I think I'll have succeeded if communities here in this ECA forum next year, maybe, will step out and say, you know what, we like these SMRs, but how about, could we also take that waste disposal facility? So shout out to Stephanie, send her an expression of interest to just have a conversation. You might be surprised. This is not a bad endeavor.
Katrina, did you want to add?
Sure. First of all, I should say, and didn't say this earlier, so my organization is focused on the waste, the back end of the fuel cycle. Most of our members are very pro-nuclear. We want to see the nuclear renaissance. That includes the things that Oklo is doing and the things that Orano's doing. We are supportive of that in general, but that's not what our organization is about. So we, for instance, say to folks who may be a little bit less excited about new nuclear, we say, you can be a part of us too. This is really about moving forward on the waste issues. But again, most folks are real pro-nuclear. So I wanted to emphasize that I come in peace when I say this. And we want to see recycling develop. I think most of our members, I shouldn't say we as the NWSC, but most of our members are very excited about all of those things. However, I think it's important to emphasize a few things that the others have said, that you do still need to move forward. I've heard in different forums over the years, sometimes I'll ask a question about waste and they'll say, well, technology is going to take care of that. And I hope it does. We all hope it does. We would like to not exist anymore. We would like this problem to be resolved one way or another. But as you've heard, there's still going to be waste at the end, even if you do recycle, even if you do have the advanced nuclear. So we really want everyone to join together, including those advanced reactor developers, including the recycling folks, and try to work with us on getting a solution that hopefully will put us in a better position at this stage of this nuclear renaissance, and hopefully it can be more positive moving forward and that the waste won't be an impediment to all the things that you all want to partner with these companies to do.
Thank you. And, since we've been talking about recycling and reprocessing, another question, maybe Brian, you want to start, but anybody feel free. What is the reality for reprocessing and recycling in the United States? Like, do we think that that is actually going to happen in the United States?
I hope so.
It's bringing a lot of people to the table.
It is.
And you're hearing it on Capitol Hill all the time. But you've all agreed, and I think we all in the room agree, you still are going to need a deep geologic repository.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
is it fair, is it right that this is bringing people to the table?
Yeah, I think the discussion is starting to happen where before the discussion, it was on the outskirts, recycling, reprocessing, what are you going to do with the waste? The anyway, you guys know what I'm trying to say. That was on the back end of all the discussions. It wasn't, you wouldn't even get people to come to the table to discuss these kind of things. Now you're starting to see the needle move, and you're starting to see people talk more openly about the problems that we're having and the waste that's being created, and how do you actually deal with those waste streams.
100% recycling is going to occur in the U.S. I mean, we fully intend to do it. We're in pre-application interactions with NRC right now. Don't have a published date as when we're going to submit an application, though. I do believe, though, at the end of the day, recycling in the United States, anyways, is going to be done because of economics. Cost is going to drive it. It has to be economically viable for it. For us, I mean, as I said yesterday, we control our supply chain. So we're going to be recycled to make fuel for ourselves. We're confident we can do recycling cheaper than we can manufacture fresh fuel with HALEU. That doesn't mean we're going to stop doing fresh fuel with HALEU. We will be doing that for quite some time. But the economics are there. If the economics are not there, then recycling will not go forward. In the U.S. anyways.
The reason it's not gone forward before, right?
That's correct. Yes, as Trina just said. I mean, that's, I think, predominantly the reason why it hasn't moved forward in the United States before. I mean, backing up, ignoring the original when we kind of put a halt on everything. But the economics are what's going to drive it.
Thank you. I want to open it up to the floor if anybody has any questions for these folks. But in the interim, what needs to happen in the short term? What do you see as a next step to be addressing these issues? Anybody can take that. Katrina, you can start.
I would say what we're focused on, even though when you asked the question about the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, one of the things I stumbled on was about the lack of flexibility. I actually think there's a decent amount of flexibility in the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. So one of the things that we've been focused on is trying to aim more directly at the appropriators to get Paul's team over the Department of Energy the money he needs to do the projects that he has in the queue to really move the ball forward. And so that's something that they can do without, wholesale changes to the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. And so we're hopeful that we're going to have the opportunity to, have some regular order and perhaps get through the appropriations process, some additional funding to really move that ball forward at DOE. And of course, you all can help with that in talking to your legislators as well.
Maybe if I could just add to what Everett just mentioned earlier, really the whole back end is part of the economic assessment, the economic viability of this new nuclear, of existing nuclear. Well, the used fuel that exists, has to be managed. Future nuclear, same thing. How can all this be done in the most effective manner? And I think that's what's going to drive a lot of the decisions. I think a key lesson that we learned from the past many decades of nuclear power generation, it's useful to have in place an understanding of, well, one step back, nuclear power doesn't produce waste. Nuclear power, nuclear reactors produce energy. That's what we want. Waste is a byproduct, as with any other industrial process. It happens, it's radioactively contaminated materials, used fuels, and how do we manage these in the most effective manner is what we're discussing here, really. And if we can manage these very effectively, the value we get out of this nuclear energy is that much greater. The ratepayer pays for it all in the end, right? So the full life cycle, the construction operation and the back end has to be somehow covered by the electricity rates or let's say the steamed gas rates that a chemical plant pays and so on. If that can be done effectively, I think that's an important element for the business case for this nuclear. So developing all these approaches to waste processing in the plants early influence positively that business case is what I think. Is there a rush for geologic disposal? No, there's a rush to having a good process in place. And again, pointing to Stephanie, great to see this work that Dee has been done, learning from the past and setting up a new process here. Does it have to happen in 10 years or 20 years? No. Spent fuel storage or maybe one day vitrified waste storage if there's processing, they're not a problem. They're being done and they can be done a few more decades. I think a viable, economically viable approach is get it done right and not repeat the cycle too often. Right.
Agreed. Do we have any questions from the audience? Manuel. Just coming for you.
Hi, thanks for the conversation. From a legislative perspective, federal legislation seems to be a good amount of excitement around enabling the advanced nuclear reactors, various types. Glad to see the ADVANCE Act get through. Katrina talked about the need for an integrated program that includes near-term consolidated interim storage, but also some type of a robust repository program. And don't see quite as much. Well, I guess I'll state it positively. How do you all think that we can advance policy reform so that we could amend the Nuclear Waste Policy Act in a way that would enable the program to move forward in a more robust manner, and perhaps allow the DOE to expand its work beyond to include, of course, consolidated interim storage, but also perhaps, whether it's, as Katrina says, a second repository, but an integrated program with both?
Who wants to take that one first? Okay, Katrina, we've made eye contact. Oh, no, but then Everett reached for it, so Everett wins.
Katrina, you want to start?
No, you go ahead. I've kind of covered some of it already as man.
It's a real challenge to figure out how to move forward. I think on the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, one thing that can be considered is start with some strategic, tactical changes to it. Ultimately, we probably need a significant change in terms of the management organization and recognition that Yucca's probably not going to be the repository. But I wouldn't necessarily start there. I'd start with some strategic things, so get people used to it, get Congress used to and rethinking about nuclear waste issues. I like what the department's trying to do on the collaborative, and I love the change to collaborative, by the way. I think that's great. I think it's a better recognition of what it is going to be, a collaboration, a relationship between the community and the department. If they can get moving on that and build that relationship can help to influence change as necessary. One of the biggest challenges on the political side is every 4 years we have a new, an election, or 2 years on the House. So that creates a lot of challenges. Change in administrations, both at the state level and the federal level. So if you can get something started and build the momentum, then it can help influence the change as we go forward. That's my suggestions.
Sure. I've probably said most of this again already, but, and I didn't really finish the thought about why I didn't think necessarily that the Nuclear Waste Policy Act was inflexible. And I think of that because even under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, if you do the licensing process with respect to the repository when they did the amendments and chose Yucca Mountain, if you follow the process through, it even has a provision, though, that if you get to the end of that and the answer is no, you kind of start all over again with siting. So it kind of factored in some of the problems that we ultimately had. And of course, the dates were inflexible, but if we didn't have the dates, we wouldn't be able to return or restore some of the utility funding that was collected from customers and make customers a little bit whole for the money that they'd spent on that, so that it offsets future cost for keeping the fuel on site for as long. But I want to emphasize too that even though I was saying in the short term, really focusing on appropriations, we do of course support the longer term changes to federal law, such that you're allowed to reestablish really an integrated nuclear waste management program. I think in the short term, you could focus on trying to get an office set back up in DOE that's really focused on the issue, but in the longer term, we really feel strongly, and I think a lot of organizations agree, that you really need to get the program out of DOE altogether so that it has more of a fluid way. You kind of keep people focused on the mission at hand and getting the waste problem solved despite the political upheaval and the changes every few years. And then also getting access to the money is a big, difficult problem to solve. It really shouldn't be, because there are other funds that have been collected from different types of customers for different purposes over the years. Congress figures out a way to get access to those. It's hard, but they can do it. And this was a lot of money collected from customers over the years, and we don't want them to come back to electric customers one day and say, now we need more money, even though they have $50 billion sitting there for that very purpose. So they really need to get access to the money. They need to get the program out of DOE long term, and definitely just get us back on track with a real program.
Yeah, last year they introduced, or Pfluger and Levin introduced, the Nuclear Waste Administration Act of 2024, and I think, Katrina, in our conversations with all the different groups that are in this paddling pool, there really is, you are really hearing a lot of agreement on those three things that you've just mentioned. So, I'm going to wrap it up because I know that we're at time now, and there were no other questions from the audience, so I will wrap this up. But, ECA is, as I said before, one of the 12 DOE consortia, and I do think that DOE deserves some credit for stepping back enough to let communities, states, companies all have this conversation and kind of feel out what is the art of the possible. And so to Stephanie and to Paul and Marla, who are in here, it's really fantastic. But it's time to get moving. So ECA, as one of the recipients, we got a chunk of money, and we gave half of it out through grants and are using half of it to try and do some technical assistance. As communities are thinking about this, and hopefully we'll be able to give more grants out, just as a closing question, what would you, from your positions that you have, what would you advise a community to be aware of and to think about as they debate whether or not to enter into a waste mission?
Okay, I'll start. First of all, I'd highly recommend it because, obviously, I make the assumption this is done with all the prospects and proposals that were presented in manners as we witnessed in other national programs. I'm guessing you may be most familiar with the Canadian one. UK, Japan are following similar efforts with a mix of engagement, developing the conversation, and studying the geoscience to make sure that is an appropriate place. You can't go anywhere, right? There are places with good geoscience which are suitable for geologic disposal, others are not. So both have to fit, obviously. I think this approach will start the conversation, see what it means. Canada said, let's learn together. I love the way they say that because, honestly, they learn together because they also have to learn. They don't know the geoscience before going there. Say, are we allowed to just study the geoscience in your community? All the while we have a conversation with you. If we find that geoscience holds certain promises, that it has the good properties, and if we find that the social fabric of the community, the county, the state, all what you need are positive, let's continue the conversation. It's nothing that happens overnight. This is a conversation that no matter what will go on for a decade or more. So there's plenty of time to get to know each other. And if there's this ability to say, well, you know what, we did this for 5 years, but we're really not convinced and we feel uncomfortable, it doesn't fit in our county, our state, then we can go back. I think this is the plan. I would start this conversation. I would see it as a huge opportunity for my community because it's 100+ years of a very clean, a very steady income industry. Just give you an example. In France, they sited their geologic disposal way out in the country. in a very rural agricultural area with very few citizens, and as everywhere around the world, these areas just lost all their youth because there were no jobs. You know, there were not enough people to work on the farms. The French organization moved in. First, we were wondering, well, how does this help? Because people don't have a PhD in geoscience. How are they going to get a job? There are hundreds of jobs for everyone there, and actually it allowed families to move back and stay in these communities. So there are many positives.
Brian, any thoughts about what communities should be thinking about? Quickly, we're wrapping up.
Yeah,
So
I'll go real quick.
You got,
I'll go real quick.
12 seconds.
All right, 12 seconds. 10. No, just kidding. So I think you know what we've learned in France and what we've learned you know, trying to get our fuel fabrication facility in Oak Ridge. I think you've got to engage the community early, and you've got to be able to engage the community. You've got to tell them the pluses and the minuses. You can't shy away from the negative talk about, you know, distractors. You got to be able to engage those distractors and bring them into the fold instead of running away from them.
Thanks. Everett?
I would just say to communities, ask all the questions you want, and please be open-minded. Try not to come in with any preconceived ideas. Be open to listening, and the same should be true for all of us on the developer side.
The only thing I think that I didn't touch on would be transportation, and I think that this may be something that communities may be interested in. You may know this already, but there tend to be transportation experts in your state already, emergency management, people who are trained and ready to help with transportation. So a lot of times that's another thing that comes up in addition to waste as well. We're worried about moving this stuff around. My advice would be don't worry about that, because there are people in place to help you with that, not just at the federal government level, but in your state and communities.
Yeah, and I just want last thing to, and I know I'm biased as well, but that's why I think ECA communities are incredible communities. They have waste. Some of it is being dealt with, and we know what the plan is. Some of it we're still waiting to figure out what the plan is. And they are here because they are still interested in new nuclear emissions. And I don't know what better message that sends to say these things are workable, safe, and engines of development. And I really hope that we can all continue these conversations to steal a phrase of Chairman Wright's so that we can make NIMBY go from meaning not in my backyard to nuclear in my backyard. Please join me in thanking the panel.
For those folks that are in collaborative siting consortia members, if you could hang out by the blue panel. Everybody else, we're going to break for lunch. Please come back at 1:30. We want to wrap this out with like really some concrete next steps and some things that are coming up. So we'll reconvene here at 1:30. Thank you and enjoy lunch. Ask the questions you didn't ask in the group.